Obviously, folks, there's been a lot of news swirling around the never-ending issues of the Photogate scandal involving both Dianna Russini and Mike Vrabel, and it's gone from being a sports issue to a TMZ clickbait, rage bait ordeal. But the only guy who has some sort of sanity about this whole topic is our good man Tony Farmer, who joins us now here on Press Row this morning, here from the West Coast. Of course, Tony, the co-host of the Last Man Standing podcast alongside Jason Aiken as well. Tony, good morning. Welcome to the show here, and thanks for joining us. And hopefully you can cast some light on this whole entire ordeal for Photogate with Dianna Russini and Mike Vrabel. Welcome to the show. How's it going today?
It's going good. Good to talk to you guys. I love the Mohegan Sun talk, by the way. I grew up about 15 minutes away from Mohegan Sun Arena in Connecticut, so that was cool to see you guys talking about that.
Cool. So, Tony, you and I kind of had some interaction a little bit because you saw my tweets because I was getting mad at people constantly of how this story was being handled. Callan knows I've been crazed. I worked in radio for 4 years in New York, so I'm crazed about how sourcing and stuff is done. What do you make of this whole situation where even big time media members are sometimes jumping the gun in the scenario of this story?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that. I think we're seeing some really good things come out of this from a journalistic perspective, and we're seeing some really ugly things as well. There's sayings in journalism, if it bleeds, it leads. People want to kind of see the pain. That's unfortunate. And you do see people jumping the gun a lot. I try to qualify my things when I put things out there and say things like, this is what we know so far and things like that. But I'll give you a good example. Like when the Mike Vrabel burner account came out, that went viral for a while, right? And people were stating it as fact. We found the Mike Vrabel. This is his account. And I was the first one to come out one of the first people to come out and say, like, wait a second, like saying that you found a burner account is like really hard to prove. Like, even if it sounds exactly like the person in their voice, unless they're admitting it, like, how do you prove a burner account? And we're seeing a lot of that, people stating things as fact that we just don't know yet.
Yeah, I mean, Tony, this story has been an absolute whirlwind, and Nick and I got, in a way, trolled by our own network host on our Sunday program that, you guys host the sports media and business podcast. You should be loving this story. And we even said we're not, because we're not here to act like TMZ Sports or Page Six or act like this is tabloid stuff for Maury or Jerry Springer. We want to bring the news of what we know, but from our own perspectives. Again, Nick's worked in radio. I worked in radio. I work in sports media still here in Southern California when it comes to public address announcing and writing on the side. And I think, though, Tony, that what has caught my eye more so as the story has progressed and blew up, again, I'm not a big NFL fan either, as I've been saying, since the Chargers left San Diego. But I think what's been more damaging, I think, though, Tony, for the industry is now all the retractions of like the early, like, hey, this is what we know, and this is correct, and, take it and shove it if you don't want to. But now the retractions, though, regarding Dianna's son and the scrutiny over the boat rental forms. From your perspective, though, Tony, has this situation genuinely impacted maybe how an NFL front office might view Mike Vrabel's viability for future roles in leadership? Or is this simply right now a media-on-media echo chamber that the league will eventually ignore? Because, I've long been of the belief, though, that, that Russini resigns on her own terms, and people think, oh, she's guilty because she resigned on her own terms, though, where I literally called out every damn network host on here, minus Nick. So all of you guys, so all that you care about as fans of this sport that I hate is wins and losses, and Vrabel's fine. That's my main problem that I have here, is that it's good for one person and not for the other side of the whole story. But Tony, your thoughts, though, about maybe where that logic maybe stands in your mind?
Yeah, it's a good question in terms of how this might affect Vrabel going forward. There's been a couple former NFL players, Leonard Fournette and Jarvis Landry, who have come out and said, if Mike Vrabel was black, he might not have a job right now. And I think that's an interesting perspective. I think that's a good conversation to have. I think that's a worthy conversation to have. He does work for a very powerful owner who has had a few scandals in New England. So they're no strain. And I don't say that to take a shot at the Patriots. I say that to say they have experience dealing with the PR aspect of it. But getting back to your question in terms of like how he's viewed by the league going forward, I think this year, if he keeps his job, will go a long way toward that. I mean, if he brings the Patriots to the playoffs, to a Super Bowl again, after all this, he is going to be glorified for overcoming this. And he's probably going to win another coach of the year. That wouldn't surprise me. But in terms of the leadership aspect, I think a part of leadership is accountability, and a part of leadership is decision making. And whether you want to debate, I had a debate with a guy, a Patriots fan, 90-minute debate last week, and he says they weren't kissing in the bar, they were just close talking. Whatever. To put yourself in that position in a New York City bar with two famous people in this day and age where people got their phones out, that is a poor decision. So what we've seen, in my opinion, is a pattern of poor decisions. So when you're a head coach and you have to hold players accountable for their own poor decisions, like we got the Rashee Rice thing going on in Kansas City right now, stuff happens. Perhaps players, I'm speculating here, I'm not in that locker room, but I've heard from other, former NFL players, perhaps players might look at a coach a little differently who has had his own stuff going on and hasn't been able to keep his own house in order.
So the biggest frustration with me, including some of our shows, we have a large network. We have about 15 shows we do on here. And some guys on our network are saying, oh, it's Vrabel can't be for blame because it's wins and losses only as a head coach. And Callan and I have been yelling about this for the last month because some of our other hosts were saying, oh, he's not to blame because he can do whatever he wants because he's the head coach. And Russini's fully to blame because she's a journalist in this whole scenario, which is like blowing my mind, and I want to blow the roof off my house over here because of journalism. Do you see it from the standpoint that both of them have to be held accountable in this scenario and not just Russini because she's the journalist?
All right, there's a lot to unpack here because I believe that there is and I'm not taking a side on this. I'm just going to break it down first. I believe there's a feminist perspective from this argument that there are two people involved. There's a man and a woman, and the woman is seemingly being held accountable because she stepped down after an investigation. And the man, not only is he not being held accountable, but he got a standing ovation a couple weeks ago, right? So I think that's sort of the premise. Where I disagree a little bit with that premise, now that we've explained it, is that she did have very specific journalistic standards that any journalist, and I'm a former journalist myself, knows you can't get that close to a source. And if you do, you should expect to lose your job, okay? Whereas with him, you could argue it's a little more gray because the NFL's personal conduct policy, they've got, a piece in there about like, you can't undermine the integrity of the league. Like there's no like bullet point that you can point to in his job description that says that. So in that way, from a job expectations perspective, you could make an argument against that feminist argument and say, no, this is a job expectation thing. It's not a gender thing. That being said, I do feel like she's getting a little bit more heat. I mean, the NFL has decided not to investigate Mike Vrabel. They've only said it once. More information has come out since then. They haven't updated it. It's just kind of like a sweep it under the rug type thing. I've been talking on my channel about concerns about tampering. If you want me to walk through some of those, I can with you.
Please do.
There's the coach of the year tampering or coach of the year concern where he is the reigning coach of the year. She's a coach of the year voter. That's an obvious conflict of interest right there. She's one of 50 AP voters. And so I do feel like she is getting perhaps a disproportionate amount of heat in this situation compared to Mike Vrabel.
It's just unbelievable. I just don't understand. Like everyone say, oh, it's clearly her fault. It's one-sided. And that's what I see in the media. And that's what I've been arguing with people. I don't know if you know who this is, but I got into a fight with Zach Gelb on social media because he kept saying, oh, well, it's all her fault. It's all to blame. He did nothing. I don't understand. And page 6, which is another one that's just jumping. And I don't know if you saw this too. TMZ at the beginning said, we don't even want to touch this story.
Right.
And I found that kind of funny. Callan and I laughed about that because way back when, and I think TMZ has changed a lot since the days of we're just the paparazzi. But do you find it interesting that page 6 was willing to go further in that scenario than TMZ actually was?
Yeah, and let's think about what was TMZ, because people have speculated, oh, it's because TMZ didn't think it was much of a story. No, that's not what they said. Their reason was because they didn't want to police the bedroom. That was their reason that they gave. And so does that sound like the TMZ that you guys know? Like, I haven't seen TMZ have
Absolutely
those sort of
not.
standards in the past. And notice now that TMZ is releasing more information about this. They're like neck and neck with Page Six at this point. So a decision was made. We don't want to police the bedroom, and suddenly now they are interested in this story. So I wonder what's changed. But going back to Page Six, I don't know if you guys are aware of this or not, but they had the accident story that came
Yes.
out around April 16th that Dianna Russini, this is their headline, was involved in a daring rescue of an elderly
Yes.
man and his dog, and kind of painted this picture that she was a hero. They had a source that said she was lifted up. A tall man lifted her up on top of the Jeep. And I requested the body cam footage from that. And it in no way reflected whatsoever anything that they mentioned in that story from that witness's perspective. So I called Page Six. I got Oliver, the writer, on the phone. He wouldn't talk to me on the record. But you'd think, right, if you were a journalist, you guys are, someone calls you up and says, hey, very respectfully and professionally, hey, I think you might have got this wrong. Can I like share my notes with you? Like, you'd think you'd want to
Yeah.
like work with them, right? Instead of like a defensiveness.
Yeah.
And what happened was, after basically sharing, I'm printing a story tomorrow morning that contradicts your story, and I have information that very much contradicts your story. I think you guys are going to kind of look bad when I print this tomorrow. Less than 4 hours after expressing that, the story changed. He printed a new story with a new headline that said, bizarre twist in the Dianna Russini scandal. We've
I
got
saw
a
your
new
tweet.
eyewitness
Yeah.
seat, right? So just totally irresponsible journalism. And I've got all the receipts to prove this, by the way, when the timeline of that communication, et cetera. Just completely irresponsible journalism. And it's really sad because when that first story came out with what I believe was a false witness based on my own research, Yahoo ran with that, AOL ran with that, Fox News ran with that. So that one fake, in my opinion, source caused this whole ripple effect and all these dozens of news agencies to repeat and parrot what I believe was a BS story.
Tony, where do you think we go from here when it comes for Dianna Russini's future? We've heard rumblings that she might become like an independent journalist and do her own thing. We've heard the ties to Stu Gatz and the Levitard show on Barstool. I think a lot of people that are on her side, again, we're not really on anyone's side, though we just want to see both sides get the equal treatment when it comes to, the scorn and the blame for both of them acting very much out of control over the course of this entire ordeal. But Tony, where do you think, though, or what do you think, and where do you think, if anything, does Dianna Russini wind up once the NFL season does begin? Does she, keep it, independent? Does she, jump onto a new network? Or what do you think might be the best way forward for her to continue her career without having to worry about all this nonsense that's happened since the end of March?
Yeah, it's a great question. When she deleted her Twitter account, I feel like that was kind of a tell for her next steps moving forward. You guys know it's very difficult to build that strong of a following on Twitter, which is what she had. And so that just makes me wonder. I don't have any inside information about her next steps, but that does make me wonder, if your plan today was to continue down this path and continue to be an NFL reporter, it'd be a tough decision to delete your Twitter account. So I feel like that is probably less likely of her options. But as I said earlier this week, I think America is a very forgiving country when people own their mistakes. So I'm also not ruling out, a return to NFL reporting. But podcast, I mean, she had a podcast. It was fairly successful. So she could return to the podcast route. Who knows? I think she's got several options and great connections. Nobody should doubt Dianna Russini's connections. I think that's one of the things we're witnessing right now with this media coverage, is that she has a lot of friends. So people that are that connected, that whole saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. She knows a lot of people. So I do think she'll land on her feet.
Now, what do you make of the speculation that she was shopping the story around? We heard Good Morning America. I thought I heard 60 Minutes was possibly a place. What do you make? Do you think that she is using that, or possibly trying to use that as a comeback or to expose? Do you see that happening?
I have no idea. And I haven't seen anything like that I'm comfortable like reporting on in terms of that, like in terms of like a good sourced story. I have seen like outlets like WEI and Pro Football Talk sort of speculate about this NDA that it could been, if Dianna, there's a lot of ifs here. If Dianna Russini has dirt on Mike Vrabel And if the Patriots want to stop her from sharing this dirt, they could sort of essentially buy her out and have her sign an NDA and pay her money not to talk about these things. So that sort of stuff is going out there. I haven't seen anything that I'm comfortable, reporting on in terms of that, but perhaps another option that she has. We'll see.
Well, I just want to follow up one thing, Callan. Just so, wasn't there a report that the Patriots tried to block the story or tried to stop it from going into the paper, or did I mishear that?
Yeah, those reports seemed a lot more credible to me. We heard those right from the beginning, around the time that ESPN published their big story. Finally, by the way, a couple weeks after all this. So yeah, there were reports that Robert Kraft. It was literally Robert Kraft, what the reports was, that he tried to kill the story. I think TMZ reported that the Patriots denied that, which of course they would, right? Yeah, so I suppose if you want to believe TMZ's reporting, maybe they didn't, but to me, it's just it's pretty clear to me the Patriots don't like people talking about this. Like, who would want people talking about your head coach all summer long, and then we get the Chargers video coming out where people are laughing at him and stuff? To me, that seems like a nightmare from ownership's perspective.
I mean, it has to be. But again, folks, Tony Farmer, host of the Last Man Standing podcast, alongside Jason Anik, joins us here on Press Row for this Wednesday afternoon. Tony, I think the other big thing that Nick and I talked about that we did not agree with whatsoever was, in a way, kind of the hit job piece by Nancy Armour in USA Today, where, in a way, she seemed to group every single female writer, female sideline reporter, female analyst into the same boat of Dianna Russini about, well, if it's one person doing it, then it makes all of us look bad. And that went to Elle Duncan defending defending Russini's career, and Sarah Spain defending it, though. Tony, do you buy that notion, though, that it's the whole argument, though, that it takes one to spoil it for the rest of us, though? But your thoughts maybe on Nancy Armour's commentary that if it's one female reporter doing it, then it makes the rest of them look bad? I don't think I buy that whatsoever.
So I haven't seen her piece on that, so I'll be speaking a little bit out of pocket here, but I do. I've heard this sentiment from journalists in the field, male and female, that it sort of reinforces some negative stereotypes. Long before this scandal broke, that has been an unfair, in my opinion. I think everybody would agree with that, actually, right? That's an unfair stereotype of female reporters, especially attractive female reporters, that they're actually not good at their job. They're only getting this opportunity because of the way they look, or they actually don't know football very well. They're only getting this opportunity because of, the way they look and that sort of stuff. So unfortunate that a story like this will reinforce that belief. If you already started with that belief, which I don't believe, by the way, but if you already started there, a story like this just reinforces it. It's like, I told you, it's everybody that's doing it, which I think is really unfair. With Dianna Russini herself, I don't know if you guys saw the MILF clip where she was introduced on a radio show, and she kind of sort of corrected the radio host and was like, I actually don't want to be introduced as an NFL reporter or as an insider. I want to be introduced as a MILF.
Yeah,
and even when she made that comment, which was long before this scandal, I remember thinking like, oh, you might be accidentally like adding fuel to that stereotype.
Exposing yourself a little.
Yeah, you're not even yourself, but others. Like you're poking at that stereotype about female reporters. And I'm not a female reporter, but I just wonder if other female reporters out there might have cringed and been like, oh, you shouldn't have said that. I don't know. I'm speculating.
So actually, you lead me to the next point, which is all the clips that we've seen of her on Twitter, social media, everywhere, where she likes to poke fun. She likes to be sarcastic on air, all different shows, especially with Le Batard and Stugatz. Pardon my take, because she's big over there. Do you think people were over-exaggerating a little bit when they were watching those clips, saying that automatically makes her guilty because she was just trying to be herself, I guess, in a sense? And people were just saying, oh, she hates her husband. She doesn't like her relationship. What do you make of all that craziness going on social media with those clips?
Yeah, I mean, we have to remember that Dianna Russini has been around for a very long time. And if I had an 11-year career and I was involved in some scandal and people were only able to pull like 7 or 8 clips out of 11 years, I'd feel pretty good, right? So we should also keep that in context for sure. But this is just the nature of these incidents where people are going to go back and connect dots, myself included. I've been involved in this myself. People are going to go back and make assumptions and things like that, and that's part of the game. And that's I think every person in the limelight, whether it's a celebrity or a reporter, et cetera, should be aware of that and should be conscious that the things that they say moving forward. With Dianna, there were clips. There was also some stuff on social media, that people raised their eyebrows at, that kind of looked like some breadcrumbing was going on. And I don't think she did herself any favors there. But I think I would agree with your assessment that though some of those things may have been stretches, and some of those things may have kind of been taken too far, for sure.
Again, folks, Tony Farmer, host of the Last Man Standing podcast, alongside Jason Anik, joins us here on Press Row, trying to shed some more light on the ongoing issues plaguing the Mike Vrabel, Dianna Russini story that, of course, we've been following in spurts here on Press Row, across ETB, what have you, over the last several weeks, trying to get some more news to come out of this whole thing. I will say, though, Tony, I think what's been a bit more alarming, just from my perspective, and I think even from Nick's perspective a little bit, is how in recent weeks, though, that it seems like TMZ has kind of been back on their bullshit. And I say that about being back like the paparazzi era of TMZ, where now, Russini is spotted at a restaurant with friends before they go to a concert and stuff. And, maybe the speculation that her two friends intentionally move out of the way so the person behind them can get a picture of her sitting at the table. And they dug up, the boat rental, and Russini saying, no, my kid's not named after Vrabel. Tony, have we reached the point, though, maybe now where people are just so desperate for the story to continue going that they're just now grabbing at anything that they can from the past 6 years of this whole thing?
Yeah, I think there could be some truth to that. The leaning to the side thing in the restaurant, that was first suggested by the folks at 98.5, Zolak and Bertrand. I think when you couple that with what I brought up about the weirdness with the car accident and this strange eyewitness who was supposedly there, it makes theories like that a little bit more realistic. You guys may or may not be aware, I didn't even retweet or share that restaurant footage because it was pretty benign. It was a person sitting in a restaurant, and whether it was staged or not, I'm open to either conclusion, by the way. Whether it was staged or not, it didn't really add a whole lot to the story for me. I will say this, though. I don't think this story completely ends until we hear from The Athletic, because she resigned from The Athletic. Seemingly, I don't know about you guys, but that resignation letter, to me, it seemed like there may have been a little tension between her and The Athletic when she left. And The Athletic right now is doing an investigation. So you said something to the effect of, could we be toward the end of this story? People are grasping at straws. I'm paraphrasing. Sorry. I don't think this story completely ends until we hear from The Athletic and what they got out of their investigation.
Agreed.
So you were talking about WEEI before, and I saw you post that story, the write-up at least, about the hosts being potentially thrown out of their job because they were talking about the scandal, which I think it was proven it was not. They were just laid off, I think, after the situation. Do you think that WEEI would have tried to censor the story being part of the Patriots, covering the Patriots? Do you think that actually could have actually happened or no?
Yeah, I do. I mean, there's another case out there with the USA Today with Chrissy. Sorry, I'm forgetting her last name right now, but Chrissy Freud.
Chrissy Freud, yeah.
Where, she spoke up and she lost her job, and it certainly seems like there's a connection there with that one. I think that the media companies are powerful.
That's true.
And media companies have all sorts of inherent conflicts of interest in their existence, right? So they've got advertiser conflicts of interest, right? If a media company's biggest advertiser that's paying everybody is from, a meat company, maybe they don't want someone who's coming in that's vegan talking about how meat's bad, right? So they inherently have conflicts of interest. And when you have a sports station that covers in some way, whether it's as a credentialed reporter or relies on the New England Patriots in some way or another, I don't think it's far-fetched to suggest that someone could potentially lose their job for getting a little too out of line. I think that's a very realistic scenario in my mind.
Tony, I think last question for me, though, mainly is just, how much of an anchor do you think this story becomes now that we're past the schedule release date again, as we said, or as you said, the Chargers mocked the story. I think the Seahawks mocked the story too in their release video, about their rematch with the Pats later in the season. How much though, Tony, maybe from the Patriots perspective, where again, I think Nick and I said this very much loud and clear a few weeks ago, that for a franchise though, Tony, even as someone who doesn't watch the NFL anymore, that you want to remember the Patriots for being six times champions and what they did on the field with Belichick and Brady and the lineage of their franchise. You don't want to remember them, though, for all the scandals of Deflategate, Spygate, Robert Kraft in the massage parlor, and now this happening. We've called it Photogate here, tongue-in-cheek, though. But maybe, though, Tony, from a Patriots perspective, how quickly do you want this story to end, though, and go away so you can actually focus on actually winning some games in the upcoming season?
Yeah, I think they want it to go away as quickly as possible. There was people on Twitter saying that this story was going to go away at the NFL draft, that the NFL draft coverage and fallout from that and people talking about the excitement of, the new players in their team was going to drown this out. And they said the NFL schedule was going to drown it out, and it hasn't. I think the Patriots want it to go away as soon as possible. I think there are a couple other shoes to drop. One, does A.J. Brown get traded to the Patriots? I mean, that's some of the tampering smoke involving Dianna Russini has to do with A.J. Brown. So if that happens after June 1st, believe me, Eagles fans on Twitter will be screaming at the top of their lungs that the reason that this trade took place is because Dianna Russini sort of greased the skids for this months ago. So that's something that could happen. I also think I'm really intrigued to see if Mike Vrabel keeps his job. How is the visitor media going to handle Mike Vrabel in press conferences, right? Like, here's your scenario. Week 1, you're on the road against Seattle. They just lost to Seattle in the Super Bowl, so it's not a stretch to say they could lose this game as well. So now you're in the post-game press conference. All it takes is one reporter with Mike Vrabel in a bad mood to say, Coach, you guys lost, 20-3. You weren't able to get in the red zone today. Do you think the off-the-field distractions could have impacted the way that your team played today? And all of a sudden, this story is back in the news. And don't forget, there's away reporters at home games for the New England Patriots as well, but it's a bigger contingency when you're on the road, and 3 of their first 4 games are on the road. So it could be a situation where this story dies down a little bit, and then we see some spikes and we see some blips when questions like that get asked. And don't forget, there are a lot of questions that still have not been asked. We don't know who paid for the $2,000 a night resort in Sedona. That's important because if Russini paid for it, she would have been paying her sources. If Vrabel paid for it, he would have been paying a Coach of the Year voter. Both of those aren't okay. We need to know who paid for that resort. Does Mike Vrabel have a clause in his contract? Remember, coaches' contracts aren't public like players are. Does Mike Vrabel have a clause in his contract that pays him more money for winning Coach of the Year? These are all relevant, fair journalistic questions that I think should be asked. And maybe some brave random reporter asks in week 4, and this story kind of spikes again. We'll see.
I mean, I don't think they're going to talk because the Patriots just don't talk anything. I mean, just from my point of view. But last question I'll ask, and you started to briefly talk about it, the scheduling for week 1. Do you think it was interesting by the NFL putting the Patriots on opening night on that Wednesday, knowing all the attention is swirling around Vrabel? Do you think they were doing that purposely, or do you think that they just said, oh, it's the Patriots, it's a Super Bowl matchup? Now, we haven't seen a Super Bowl matchup, I think, since 2018 is the last time we've seen a Super Bowl matchup. So do you find it a little odd that they put Vrabel there, knowing all the attention and media is swirling in?
Yeah, to be honest, I was a little surprised by it. I thought that they were going to try to protect Vrabel and give the Patriots like 2 or 3 home games against, bad teams so that he could kind of get a little bit of a head start going before he does face the Jets media. I did see that the New York Jets away game is like second to last week or third to last week of the season. So in that sense, perhaps they were looking out for him there. But perhaps this is a situation where even though the NFL doesn't like this story, they like ratings more than they don't like this story. And so maybe they are going to kind of run with this intrigue, and a few more people will be tuning in because, as you guys, I think, said earlier, this has become more than a sports story now at this point. And people that aren't even sports fans are curious. So like the Taylor Swift effect, you bring in people that originally were not NFL fans who are now otherwise or weren't otherwise NFL fans who are going to now watch this game, perhaps, maybe.
It's crazy. I mean, the way this story has gone, and like Callan has said, we covered it a lot in the beginning because it was a huge story. It was and people said, "Oh, it's not a sport." That was another one I heard on. I heard it on Boston stations. It's not a sports story. It is a sports story. There's NFL personnel involved in this story. That one drove me crazy. Oh, you guys are disgusting. You guys shouldn't cover it. What are we supposed to do? This is what we do as media and journalists and radio people. We're looking for an answer. We investigate until we get an answer.
I don't know if you guys saw this, but 3 days after this story dropped on April 10th, I tweeted and I called my shot and I essentially said, this is what I think is going to happen. The media is going to try to pigeonhole this story into a bedroom issue, into a salacious scandal, because they don't want to talk about the tampering allegations, the coach of the year angle, the journalistic integrities, all that sort of stuff. And so that's exactly what I think we've seen, because if someone can convince you this is a bedroom issue, then it can be easily dismissed and swept under the rug because you're being nosy. This is a personal issue. You're harming these families. This isn't your business, all that stuff. And so I think that's what happened is people want to pigeonhole this into those sort of issues. You're creepy for looking into this issue that has, nothing to do with you. And so instead of talking about the larger NFL issues, listen, prediction markets have said Mike Vrabel has a 20 to 35% chance at different times of losing his job. That alone tells you this is a football story. A coach potentially losing his job isn't a football story. A coach missing day 3 of the draft isn't a football story. I believe this has always been a football story from day one. There's just a lot of people out there that want to try to convince us it's not a football story.
Yeah, I could not agree more. It's been a sports story since the first, bombshell got dropped on the front porch, and it's been that way since, even though we've kind of reverted back to old school TMZ tabloid, ordeals back in the day. But again, Tony Farmer, thank you again for the time, my man. Where can people find the podcast and, more importantly, even find you on the radio sometimes?
Yeah, Tony's Market Tips. I've got a YouTube channel, Tony Talks Football, as well. And then if you're into NFL survivor pools at all, Last Men Pod on Twitter.
Well, Tony, thanks for coming on. You're the only one I've trusted so far. Well, I shouldn't say so far, but along this process of hearing information, because everyone has jumped the gun so far on this story. It's been crazy. So, Tony, thanks for coming on, and hopefully we can talk in the future sometime.
Absolutely. Keep in touch. Thanks, guys.